and try to keep that in mind. So to really bring about a remembering consciousness, you have to spend some time on each of these verses, understanding the meaning to the point, not just saying it very quickly and then going on to the next, but to the point where you have some experience of that. Oh yes, I do have a life of leisure and endowment right now that has this great value, but it is fleeting, disintegrating in the shortest instant, and I definitely am going to die. So impelling one to take the essence of that, for instance, is one of the meditations we've done. So we've gone over, how many glasses do I have here? We've gone over the first verse, which was on properly relying on the spiritual guide. The second verse was talking about recognizing this life of leisure and endowment that we have. I think my teachers, Lama Sopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, called it for a long time perfect human rebirth. So it means this life of leisure and endowment. Leisure or freedom, you could say, there's another word, freedom from the lower realms where you're not free to practice the Dharma, freedom from being incapable of practicing perfectly for various reasons, and yet having the qualities that come about from accumulating merit in the past, to have resources, to be in the presence of the teachings because of you've developed respect and desire to hear them in the past. You didn't avoid class or something. I remember once in Dharamsala, one nun, I don't know where she is now, long time ago, she said, Geshe Darge, when we meditate on emptiness, my mind just goes blank. And Geshe said, that was because in previous lives, you didn't have aspiration, you didn't actually meditate it. You didn't think about these things. You just sort of sat there, and the continuum of that kind of bewilderment exists now. So even if it takes effort to analyze, there's going to be some effect of that in the future with some, what we call innate wisdom. Innate wisdom from a Buddhist perspective means the wisdom seeds that you have on your mind stream from previous lives that ripen in this lifetime. And of course, there's a wisdom that comes about that you develop this lifetime. So you can enhance that wisdom even more. What do they call in the West? We call nature nurture, why people have various qualities. So this kind of natural wisdom that comes about, not from the genetics, but because of having created the karma in the past, and the wisdom that arises because of having, and the wisdom that arises this lifetime from analyzing and putting effort into that, honing the, like sharpening the edge of your wisdom sword. So we talked about that, which that second verse included a couple of ideas: the recognition of the perfect human rebirth, its value, what its causes are. We talked about causes of ethics and generosity and so forth, and pure prayer that brings them all together. And the shortness, it's the fact that it is impermanent, as I mentioned a couple times, maybe belaboring the fact that one of the features of Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the Lamrim in the Three Principles of the Path is that he put those two meditations, perfect human rebirth and death and impermanence, together. He said Manjushri advised him that there was some extra juice, Then we talked about the verse on refuge, and based upon at least a fear, a trepidation of being born in the lower realms. If you find that difficult to develop, meditate on the suffering of the lower realms. In your contemplation, try to see, is there anyone now who can protect you from falling into those realms? And the conclusion from a Buddhist perspective is that only the triratna, the three jewels of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha can protect you from the lower realms. So to entrust yourself to them in all of your activities, irregardless of what other people think of you now, you're being honest, and other people might think you're being stupid because if you lied, you'd get better results, or you I don't know, you wouldn't have to pay the parking ticket or something like that. Recognizing the effects, taking refuge in the Dharma, which is the actual refuge, observing karma, which means avoiding negative karma and creating virtuous karma. So we talked about those. And we also talked about, I think, the two more verses of the, am I mistaken? Did we talk about the verses on karma, what is it, the fourth verse and the fifth verse we talked last time, right? Okay. All right. So one was Ledang Nyomom Balung Draktuk, agitated by the waves and whirlpools of karma and afflictions, the two causes of suffering. We experience a multitude of sufferings, which are likened in this kind of analogy, the samsara being like an ocean to sea monsters, whales and squids and whatever else, maybe huge crocodiles or something. And as a recognition of that is endless, like an endless sea with incredible depth, that we're helpless to develop a desire to be free from that. Tardo, which we talked last time. I think Geshe Tardo was one of Paul's teachers and companions at his house in Virginia at one time. And then we talked also about the next verse, not just desiring liberation, but developing the thought to escape from that, putting it into action by practicing the three higher trainings. We did talk about that, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's where I wanted to just pick up. Where are we here? So I'm using a commentary by the Tibetan teacher Ngultu Dharma Bhadra. And Ngultu, I mentioned, sort of means mercury, what is it? Liquid silver, Ngultu. So in the esoteric tradition, those of you who've practiced Tantra, there's certain things that the offering becomes like Ngultu, becomes like silver. What does that remind you of? This, like alchemy, right? The philosopher's stone, somehow in the alchemists, there was some tradition way historically old that mercury had some kind of special qualities. Yeah, so 69, 68, here we are. So I just wanted to reiterate here that the last lines of that, what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4. The last lines of the fifth verse, we're talking about Lapsum Pakpe Norgi Sosung Te, holding, one translation is upholding the victory banner, holding the treasury of the Arya's jewels, which are the three higher trainings. Grant me blessings to uphold the victory banner of liberation. That's one way of translating it. Here, Ngultu Dharma Bhadra takes it to say that the prison of cyclic existence that we're talking about in this analogy, being in cyclic existence is like a prison. To free yourself from prison is the aim, right? To get out of cyclic existence. And so holding, he breaks it down into something like this, that the victory banner is kind of like, instead of, Tibetan word is gyaltsen. I don't know what it is in, I don't know what it is in Sanskrit. I thought I was thinking it was, so he takes it as the tsen rather than a banner. He takes it as a sign of victory over the army of the afflictions and the liberation from the prison of samsara. And he says that the signs of this, yeah, where was that? Tarpe Gelsen Simpajigila, Lapsum Pakpe Norgi Sozunte, to hold the trainings. Here, the sort of the meaning is sort of, instead of saying to hold the three trainings as the treasuries, Arya, the treasure of the Arya's wealth, to hold the treasure of the Arya's wealth, which are the three trainings, and thereby to uphold the victory banner of liberation. So liberation from this prison, and the victory banner here, he says, kind of means the signs which indicate victory over the army of the afflictions. And he takes those as being, interestingly, the saffron robes of a monk. So this is kind of those of you who might have some aspiration to take ordination. Maybe there's no one here. Maybe Michael. I'm hoping Michael will someday. That's kind of like a having to do with the body. You know, you're actually upholding it by taking symbols of these trainings. You wear the saffron robes of a monk, or you shave your head, or you act more ascetic. And the signs of speech, holding the victory banner of speech, is to be educated in the Tripitaka, the three baskets of the Buddhist teachings on ethics and concentration and wisdom. And the sort of the sign of the sign of holding the victory banner of the mind is that you are endowed with the three higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So that's, I think I might have said that last time, but I just wanted to say it again if I didn't, for completion. And now we're on the next verse, which is here in the text you have, training the mind in the path of higher capable beings. So what this actually means is the first couple of verses were talking about developing an interest in future lives within cyclic existence, you know, to have a better life in the future. That's called an individual who is of initial scope. You know, just that's kind of the dividing line of being a religious person from a Buddhist perspective. From a Buddhist perspective, the religions that only talk about the happiness of this lifetime don't even qualify as perhaps creating virtue. If they're only thinking about the happiness of this lifetime, at least thinking about the happiness of future lifetimes. The individuals of intermediate interest were the two verses about karma and delusion, and the watery denizens of the three sufferings, you know, developing a desire to be free from that, and the verse about the prison of samsara, overcoming the view that thinks all of this is some kind of precious pleasure garden. You know, oh man, you go to someone's apartment in New York City and you have a view of the city and oh man, this is really nice. Overcoming that view, just like the Tibetan Lama that I told you about, the present Ganden Tipa, that when saw this room that had been cleaned and all the fruit and everything there for him. And he said, it's all suffering, One of the great lamas of the past who taught the Dalai Lama, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Kundalama Rinpoche, one of the main teachers that the Dalai Lama respected very much. When people would make him offerings, he would accept them for the benefit of the people. He didn't say, no, I don't want any offerings. He accepted, and then as soon as they left, he put them under his bed until there was someone else that needed something, and he would give it to them. So it's the analogy is like a lion to whom you offer a big bale of hay. What would a lion be pleased with a big bale of hay, do you think? Lions are carnivorous beasts, right? So if you put a big pile of hay in front of a lion, it's just completely uninterested. That's the kind of mind that we want to try to develop in terms of renunciation, that's not enamored at all in the perfections of cyclic existence. I use that word. There's a verse that someone had mentioned last time. Wasn't this glance meditation that we're doing a little bit like the Yondan Shirgyurma, the foundation of all good qualities? One of the verses there is, maybe some of you know, Chebe Mingom Dugna Kungigo, Iten Mirum Sipe Punsuki, Nemek Rikne Tarpe Dewala, Dunya Chempo Kepa Jingilo. Please grant me blessings to, well, say, Chebe Mingom. There is no pleasure in experiencing, there's no satisfaction in experiencing pleasure. This is something that we're going to be talking about now. No pleasure, no satisfaction in experiencing pleasure. It is the experiencing, striving for the experiencing of pleasure is the doorway of all suffering. And thirdly, it is unreliable. The things that we think of at one time, a bowl of ice cream or the embrace or the sweet words of someone that occasionally can bring pleasure are unreliable. They don't always do so. So seeing the defects of samsaric happiness, grant me blessings to strive for the bliss of liberation. So those verses we were talking about the person of intermediate scope. Now we're going to talk about the individuals of highest scope, which means doesn't mean that they ignore the earlier meditations. If you're thinking about achieving enlightenment, it is built upon a foundation of those earlier realizations. So these are called meditations which are shared by all of these different beings. So maybe the people of beginning or intermediate scope may not meditate on this verse and the following verses, but the persons of higher scope do meditate on the lower verses. So here, Nyamdak Droa di Kundagi Ma, my mothers, all these, here says Nyamdak is translated in your verse here as miserable beings. So Nyam kind of means degenerated, in bad circumstances. Tak means tied. So tied to, to degeneration, you might say. Usually we translate Nyamtak as, we translate it as miserable, among other things. So all of these have been my mother, all of these beings who are experiencing the sufferings that we've talked about in the earlier verses. The suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, pervasive, compounded suffering. In all ways, tied to that so they can never get anything else. Having considered how all these miserable beings, my mothers of the past have been my mothers, and have raised me with kindness again and again. Yang yang dingi kyangpe sul samne. Thinking about the way in which they have cared for me with kindness again and again, continually. Tukpe bula sewe mashindu, in the same way that a compassionate mother, a merciful mother for her lovely, beautiful child. Chomin ningje keba jingilop, grant me blessings to develop non-artificial, non-effort, not a kind of compassion that doesn't depend on unmanufactured. Here it says, I seek your blessings to develop effortless compassion. Effortless for chomin. Cho means to something that's made. Min means not made, unmanufactured. Not that you have to think about it. You see some people suffering and think, oh, they're suffering, they've been kind to me in the past, or they're nice people, therefore they shouldn't suffer, and then developing mercy. That would be kind of compassion which is manufactured, having to think about it. Spontaneous, Chomin is not spontaneous, not effortless. It's kind of like one which is a natural kind of compassion, which we're trying to aim to do. It can be called effortless in some cases. So grant me blessings to develop this kind of compassion. So what this verse is talking about the doorway to the Mahayana path, which is the development of great compassion. Or let's say just compassion itself. Developing great compassion is said to be, what does it say? Entry into development of effortless compassion is said to be the entry into Mahayana lineage. So it doesn't mean that you've entered into the Mahayana path necessarily. Do you know what the entry into the Mahayana path is, anyone? You can take down those words so I can see people's response here. Do you guys know what the definition of entering the Mahayana path is? Sort of the defining characteristic? Susie's being honest, she doesn't know. Kate also, okay, so you're all being honest here, okay. So, Sunny, do you know what the defining characteristic of having entered the Mahayana path is? No, okay. So it is the development of, let's say, effortless or spontaneous bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is kind of the defining characteristic of a bodhisattva, right? Bodhicitta means a mind which, out of compassion for sentient beings, is aiming for enlightenment for their sake. Because from that position, one's mind, omniscient mind, knowing all the paths, knowing with clairvoyance where they are at, what they need, knowing all of the various means to bring about advancement, leads them perfectly. So out of compassion for sentient beings, that's the perfect state to do. That's the defining characteristic of having entered the Mahayana path. Even before that, one is said to enter the Mahayana lineage by developing spontaneous compassion. Even though it is not yet bodhicitta, when you have that state of mind, you're said to enter into the Mahayana lineage. You've awakened the Mahayana lineage. Okay, so this is a little bit talking about that. So here, Multu Dharmabhadra's commentary says, to generate bodhicitta, Janchu tu sem kepala, laksan wonder drog, one has to precede that with the exceptional thought. Do you know, when we talk about developing bodhicitta, one of the methods to develop bodhicitta is called the 7 points of cause and effect. Have you heard that? Yeah, you know, what are the 7? Recognizing all sentient beings have been your mother, feeling responsible. Remembering that all sentient beings have been your mother, remembering their kindness, feeling responsible to repay that kindness. Sometimes they just say repaying the kindness, but feeling responsible to repay the kindness. And as a result of that, developing in sequence affectionate love, and then great compassion, which is what we're talking about here as the end result. Please grant me blessings to have effortless compassion. And then as a result of great compassion, to develop what's called the exceptional thought or universal responsibility, Laksam. His Holiness, in some of the books that were translated earlier, I think he must have aided the translators as it kind of means universal responsibility, taking the responsibility upon oneself. You know, I must do that. And then as a result of that, all these other factors thinking, how can I do that? I must achieve enlightenment. That's the 7th, that's the result. There's 6 causes and 1 result. The 1 result is bodhicitta, the final result of that. So here, he's saying that it's, in order to generate bodhicitta, you have to first, that has to be preceded by the exceptional thought, which is the, you know, the genesis of that mind. For that, you have to have developed great compassion, Ningji Chenpo. For that, you have to have, it has to be preceded by affectionate love. So here we're talking about, so bodhicitta preceded by the exceptional thought, sort of universal responsibility, taking that upon oneself. That's preceded by great compassion. That's preceded by something called affectionate love. This is not fully qualified love, which desires sentient beings to be endowed with happiness. This is a mind that brings that about, that sees others in a heartwarming way. Whenever you see others, rather than like my mind now, when I see certain politicians or certain people, I say, you know, not so happy. Sort of the mind that sees everyone, high status, low status, everyone affectionately. And there are various ways to develop that affection. Here in the 7, the method of 7, the 7 points of cause and effect, 6 causes and 1 effect. The way that we develop that is by remembering that they've been mother. All these sentient beings have been our mother numberless times in the past, have been kind, and then developing the thought to repay that kindness. And as a result of that, the same way that one would feel for your own mother who has been kind to you, hopefully in this life and in previous lives, you feel a natural inclination, you know, to feel dear. You know, they feel dear to your family and so forth. So here it says, preceding great compassion, you had to develop affectionate love. So here it says, Denam la Shinkta Chempo Tamche Gompa Tungla. All of the Shinkta Chempo, the great charioteers, you could say Nagarjuna and Asanga, or you could say all of the great beings that wrote about the Mahayana. They all agree on those. And for affectionate love, there are 2 different traditions to develop that. One is the tradition we're talking about here first in this verse, is the method of remembering that sentient beings have been your mother and so forth. The other method that comes here, he says this comes from the followers of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, such as Chandrakirti and so forth. Other times people talk about the 7 methods coming from Maitreya, but generally we can say this method is exemplified in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the remembering all sentient beings as your mother and so forth, leading up to bodhicitta. It is said to be more applicable to those of duller or lesser faculties. It doesn't mean the faculties of eye, ear, nose. Those are sometimes called faculties, but the faculties of wisdom and memory and so forth. Here, the main faculty that's talked about is the faculty of wisdom, and of course, concentration and so forth, and ethics. So those who are sharper faculty, those who are of sort of ordinary faculty, we could say, this is the method that's preferred. The method that is to develop bodhicitta or affectionate love for those of sharper faculties, which I think a lot of the people in the West today, without making you feel proud or something, probably we're more tending toward that because we have the analytical ability to analyze and understand emptiness. So for those individuals, the method to develop bodhicitta, especially affectionate love, is through equalizing and exchanging self and others. So these verses talk about both of those meditations. This first verse of the Mahayana level here is talking about a method that we have to train in, even if we put most of our effort into equalizing and exchanging self and others. Sometimes that method may become unclear when you don't remember emptiness well, or for various reasons, or you've reached impasse, and you have to go back to this method of remembering that all sentient beings have been your mother and have been kind at that time. The Dalai Lama said it's like a sword, like a two-edged knife, or let's say two-edged knife in your kitchen that you cut the vegetables with. When it gets dull, of course, what we do is we sharpen it, right? But while you're sharpening it, you can still continue chopping the vegetable by turning the other blade, using the other side of the blade. So sometimes when you reach an impasse on one of these two methods to develop bodhicitta, you go back for some time, maybe weeks, months, and emphasize the other method. And then when you go back, the other side is a little more applicable. So here he says that the method of equalizing self and others mainly comes from the Avatamsaka Sutra and its principal expositors, so to speak, were Shantideva and so forth. In the Bodhisattva Charyavatara mainly talks about, great detail about equalizing and exchanging self and others. So that's called the Do Pelpoche, the Avatamsaka Sutra. Have you guys heard of the Avatamsaka? What is it called, Paul? And what do they translate that as? The
Flower Ornament Sutra?
Flower Ornament Sutra, I think very famous in Japan and places like that. But that had within it the Dashabhumika, the Sutra of the 10 Grounds, which is the basis for Chandrakirti's exposition on the Bodhisattva's perfections, the 10 perfections. So there it is. There is extensive meditation, contemplation on the faults of self-cherishing and the benefits of cherishing others. And that's the methodology that's used there. So here, in this context, this verse, we're talking about the first method of the 7 causes and effect. The causes and the effect. So there's 6 causes and 1 effect. So droa didak dikundagima. So all of these sentient, all of these, I wish I could find, maybe some of you have a better evocative word for nyamdak rather than miserable, kind of like someone who's just tied to, this being in this prison of samsara. So you can say miserable. All of these miserable migrators, destitute, maybe stricken, exhausted, wretched, pathetic, tormented, helpless. I put down on the margin of my text here, for Nyamdak, all these destitute migrators have been my mother. And seeing that they're all similar in that, they're all destitute or stricken, exhausted, wretched. This is talking about that they have all been my mother. This is talking about the first of the 6 causes, right? Recognizing all living beings have been our mother. So here it's adding the word, destitute or miserable. Yang yang dingi kyangpe sulsangre, contemplating the way in which they have cared for me with kindness, kindly cared for me again and again. This is the verse that's showing their kindness, remembering the kindness of sentient beings, and implicitly repaying their kindness. Although the words aren't there that, I must repay them, but just reminding one that they have cared for us again and again with kindness. And that includes the meditations, that our mothers gave us this body. They gave us food, maybe from their own breast, the milk, or food and so forth. They protected us in various ways, and they cared for our enjoyments and our education and so forth. Various factors you can think about. Even the mother of this lifetime, when you go back and think of how much effort they did to protect us from putting our fingers in the electric socket, or falling into the swimming pool, or so forth, and how they gave us, they provided for us food and protection, education. They wanted to make sure. I always remember when I think of my mom, she said, she always said, I want you, my brother and I, she said, I want you boys to be good. I want you to be good boys. Always, and made sure that we were educated and so forth, and worked hard. Remembering their kindness again and again. Dukbe Bula, so that means beautiful child. Those words, or how does it say here? Precious child. It doesn't, Dukpa doesn't necessarily mean precious. It means like, dear, beautiful. Dukpa sometimes means repulsive. When you talk about the meditating on the repulsive nature of the body and so forth, but it also means beautiful, precious, So to her, those words, precious child, are indicating affectionate love of these 7, according to Multu Dharma Bhadra's commentary here. And then what does she say here? Loving mother. Actually, Sewe is like when we say Migme Sewe Te Chen Chen Rezi, the mantra of Lama Tsongkhapa. Maybe some of you know. Sewa is a word that means merciful. It's kind of a synonym of compassion. So you could, although the text doesn't, because uses the word compassion later, when it's a bless me to have effortless compassion. Here it's saying that your text, your English says loving mother. That could take, you could say merciful mother for her precious child. So this is talking about great compassion. So when you say this verse, you would meditate mainly on the method to develop bodhicitta, called the seven points of cause and effect, up until the point here of developing great compassion. This verse is mainly talking about generating great compassion. So it doesn't go all the way into the exceptional thought, which comes afterwards, and the actual bodhicitta. They're coming later. So this is setting the basis of entering into the Mahayana lineage, so to speak. One is not, yes, at this point, you haven't generated bodhicitta, so you're not a bodhisattva yet, but you've sort of awakened the Mahayana lineage. When we talk about the philosophical schools, we say they're individuals who have a particular lineage, like they might want to get out of cyclic existence for themselves and not really want to work a long time at it. Those would be called people of the hearer's lineage, the Shravaka lineage. Most of the disciples at the time of the Buddha in the Pali Canon were the hearers, right? The Shravakas. Those who want to get out of cyclic existence for themselves, who have a longer aim, they want to really understand everything perfectly and perhaps even have the ambition to achieve their final nirvana by themselves alone, are called solitary realizers. So those are two lineages. We say the Shravaka lineage, the solitary realizer lineage, and the Bodhisattva lineage. Bodhisattva lineage are individuals who have awakened the Bodhisattva lineage, are individuals who have developed effortless compassion for others. And so they are aiming for, they have the capacity to work for this higher goal. At that point, they can still fall from that. They certainly don't have bodhicitta yet, and they certainly don't have effortless bodhicitta yet. So they can fall from that. They haven't reached this point of stability of bodhicitta, but they've awakened the Mahayana lineage by developing great compassion. Does it make sense? So when you say that verse, you might, if you spend days on that or hours, you go through each of the points of the 7 points of cause and effect. You have to remember what they are. It's always good to know these things. You know, sometimes when I ask what are the causes, people just jump from one to the other. Say, love, compassion, remembering mother, you know, they leave something out. If you think about it in a sequence, remembering all sentient beings, recognizing that all sentient beings have been your mother, remembering how they have been kind. So that means, in this case, again and again, meaning numberless times, not just this one time our mother has been kind, but our present mother has been our mother numberless previous lifetimes. And although there are exceptions, there are times when our mom was caught up in her own things and didn't give us love, didn't give us this, but the general understanding when we say mother is one of they're taking care of us again and again. And then spending some time on, it may arise ordinarily, the sense of responsibility to repay their kindness. It might have to be inculcated in us. I remember one of my friends, Jeremy Manheim, who got his degree with Geshe Zopa at University of Wisconsin in Buddhist Studies. He went on to Harvard. He got they give degree in divinity. He went off to Seni Lapta, the dialectic school next to the Dalai Lama's monastery in Dharamsala. And he'd gone through all of the courses up to a certain point. I think he was there for about 6 or 7 years. And at one point, he'd even come in the class of like maybe 60 or 70, mainly Tibetans. He'd come in like third or fourth on the final exam. So he was like really, debating and everything, knows Tibetan very well. And then he heard that his father his mom told him that they were thinking of hospice for his dad. His dad had had emphysema for many years. And he wanted to take a break to go back to help take care of his dad. And the Gegu, the disciplinarian at the Senilapta, don't say anything I said bad. I was telling him I said bad about him. He said, no, you can't go. If you go, you have to, if you come back, you have to start from the beginning. Go through all the years again. It's like a threat. Sounds like some politicians we know, right? So he went back to take care of his dad. I thought that was kind of remembering the kindness of the parent, and taking care of the parents is something that occurs with some people more naturally. Not me. I have to be reminded to recall the kindness of parents and those that have been kind to us. Okay, makes sense. So you try to develop by remembering their kindness, feeling a responsibility to repay it, then to develop this sense of loveliness toward all sentient beings. When you look at them, it's said that Atisha, when sometimes people would hear him murmuring. He was looking out the window at the cows in Tibet. He was in a little hut, and they could hear him saying, "Ah, mother," if you can see even, scorpions and cows, they're sentient beings. They have been our mother numberless times in the past. You may be more inclined to avoid hurting them and maybe helping them in some way. Mother sentient beings. So this affectionate love is not fully qualified love, which we're going to be talking about in the next verse. Fully qualified love means a mind which wishes other beings be endowed with happiness. Here, affectionate love is kind of like a causal precedent of that, something preceding that, which just sees others kindly, okay? And as a result of that, one recognizes the depth of their suffering from having understood within cyclic existence your own plight. Remember, all of cyclic existence is of the nature of suffering. Wishing that they would be free of suffering, that's called development of great compassion. Here in the Mahayana, great compassion already has sort of the implication that I want to try to eliminate that suffering. In the Hinayana, the hearers and solitary realizers, they also use the word Mahakaruna. Maha means great, Karuna means compassion, right? Great compassion, but there they mean a recognition of the great. There means all suffering, all levels of suffering, and all beings. But it doesn't necessarily have the implication that you want to get rid of it. You just recognize that. So in the Abhidharma Kosha, it mentions that the hearers and solitary realizers have great compassion, but they mean something different by that. Still, the enormity of suffering they recognize, and they feel sympathy for that, but they don't necessarily think to remove that. So then the next verse, what is it called here? Generating bodhicitta by exchanging yourself and others. Yeah. Well, here it's in Muttradharma Bhadra's text, it says, after that first thing of developing great compassion, Nipa, Dakshen Nyamje Gomsu Lasun. So the method of meditating on equalizing and exchanging self and others has three sub-outlines. This is the first of those three, which is the method to meditate on equalizing oneself and others. So Dugnal Tamos Samyang Midoshing, Dela Namyang Choshe Mebani, Dagdan Shenla Keba Yomenshe, Shendegawa Keba Jingilo. So the English translation here, there's no difference between myself and others. None of us wishes for even the slightest of sufferings or is ever content with the happiness we have. Realizing this, I seek your blessings that I may generate joy for the happiness of others, or joy in the happiness of others. So Dugnal Tamo. Dugnal means suffering. Tamo means, very fine, minute. Dugnal Tamo Samyang Midoshing. Not, this is the plight of all of us, all living beings. We don't desire even the slightest suffering. We go out of our way to make things sort of as effortless. What I'm going to say was effortless, without any suffering at all. Even a little, someone says, we say something and they don't laugh when we tell a joke, we're offended. We don't want even the slightest suffering. We even say things to engender praise or something. If they don't praise us, we're upset. We don't want to feel hot. We don't want to feel too cold. We want everything Goldilocks, right? Well, maybe more than Goldilocks. So Dugnal Tamo Samyang Midoshing, never wishing the slightest of sufferings. Dela, what does it say? Dela Namyang Choshe Mebani. Literally, it means not finding satisfaction, never finding satisfaction. Namyang means never when joined with a negative particle later in the sentence, the mepani. So never finding satisfaction in pleasure. So what does this mean? You could say, in a less strong way, you could say, all sentient beings want to be free of suffering and to have happiness, as the Dalai Lama explains sometimes in lectures. Here it's going a little bit further in emphasizing this, never finding satisfaction in pleasure. So although we want to have pleasure, it's never enough. Whatever pleasure we have, it's not as though, oh, we had that pleasure, we can go on. We have to have it again and more, right? What did I say? Yeah, here in the Tibetan commentary, it says, Tatung, even more, still more we want. So we're without, chokshe means satisfied, or knowing satisfaction. Another word for that is ngomba in Tibetan. Even enjoying whatever pleasures we enjoy, however much pleasure we have, we're never totally satisfied. We always want either more or continued. It's not enough that we went on that we had a great experience on someone's yacht. We want to make sure that we get invited again and again and so forth. Right? So this is something which is shared with all sentient beings. It's called the equality of self and others, equalizing oneself and others. When we talk about the Equanimity Meditation, which is a prelude to developing bodhicitta, that is a meditation when we meditate that friend, enemy, and stranger over the course of time are meaningless labels because all individuals have been equally friend in some lifetimes, equally enemy, equally stranger. So there's no one who is consistently, definitely friend, like we think of this lifetime. They're my friend, or someone who's definitely our enemy. It can, all of these things can change. But here, the equalizing here is talking about it from a different point of view. It's equalizing oneself and others. All sentient beings are equal in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. All of us are equal in that we don't desire even the slightest suffering, and that we're never satisfied with this, with the happiness we have. What is that talking about? It's talking about changeable suffering. Remember we talked about this term changeable suffering before? Let me see. Could you take the words away there for a second? I'll see if people are, when I say that. Remember when we talked about changeable suffering? Do you know? Changeable suffering means what we ordinarily call happiness, was what in Buddhist terminology, technically we'd say contaminated happiness. Contaminated happiness means happiness experienced by an individual who is still, whose mind is still contaminated by grasping to inherent existence. Has anyone here realized emptiness directly? Just raise your hand. I'm not raising mine, I'm just saying examine. So probably all of the happiness that you've ever experienced is contaminated happiness. Some of it on the spectrum of maybe Dharma happiness, that means having contentment and satisfaction and not, not striving for more and more continually. But generally all of our happiness is contaminated happiness. It's what's called changeable suffering. So like the example I gave of being hot in the sun and thinking, let's go sit under the in the cool shade. So the suffering of hot goes down, but the suffering of being cold goes up until the suffering of cold exceeds the suffering of the heat, in which you start to think, ooh, let's go sit in the nice warm sun. Remember the example I gave of, what was it, apartments.com, the commercial, the girls were really wanting to be in an air-conditioned apartment, and then when they actually get their wish, they're smiling, but they're shivering because it's changed into suffering of cold, suffering of suffering. So we're all equal in this basic thing. There are other kinds of equalities between ourselves and others, but this is the main one, which is sufficient to develop this particular kind of mind that wishes for their happiness, which essentially is what we call great love. Usually you think when you talk about the progression, like in the 7 points of cause and effect, we talk about affectionate love and then great compassion. So you might think that love comes before compassion. Actually, actual fully qualified love is coincident with, is simultaneous with great compassion, but to enhance it, you have to hear this particular way of developing great compassion and developing affectionate love depends upon the equalizing oneself and others, recognizing that all of us are in the same plight, and in the same way that I want to be happy and to be free of suffering, others are exactly the same. What impact would that have? If you realize that your self-grasping, the believing in oneself as an autonomous, inherently existent person, is a fallacy that you've been laboring under, you've been holding to since beginning of this time. You have some insight into emptiness, and you realize that all sentient beings are exactly the same plight as us. In the same way that you want yourself to be happy, you'll want others to be happy. In the same way that you want to be free of suffering, you don't desire even the smallest suffering. Others don't desire suffering. So you can develop a sense of that on the basis of equalizing oneself and others. So in the same way that we want these things, others, sentient beings, all of them have that desire. That's their natural state. And that is the same as us. There's no difference between ourselves and others. When I said there are other kinds of equanimities you can talk about, we are all equal in deserving to be free of suffering and to be enjoined with happiness. We're all, equal in deserving that. We're all equal in capability of developing that. There's several other factors one can go into. So for that reason, the joy and happiness of other sentient beings, not simply not having jealousy for the happiness of others. That's usually what we call rejoicing, right? Rejoicing in the happiness of others is said to be an antidote to jealousy, right? If you see other people having happiness, you might feel jealous for that or envious. Here, rejoicing in the happiness of others is said to be an antidote to jealousy. Oh, I don't know if I talked about this in the 37 practices. Some of you attended the other talks I gave. In the 7-limb puja, who can I ask? Who's a scholar here? George, do you know 7-limb puja? George. Okay, I'm going to ask you. So the 7-limb puja of 7-limb rejoicing, the limb of rejoicing, what do you rejoice in there? To create this great deal of merit. You have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute. Yeah.
I rejoice in the virtues of others.
Right. That rejoicing in the 7-limb puja is not rejoicing in the happiness of others. You could, but you have to. You can rejoice in the happiness of others, but you have to realize that their happiness has come about because they've created the karma for that in the past. They've created virtuous karma, right? Merits. It's that rejoicing, that kind of, so rejoicing has two kinds: rejoicing in the merits of others and rejoicing in the happiness of others. Here we're talking about rejoicing in the happiness of others. So it's slightly different. If you just are happy that others are happy, are enjoying, that is more akin to great love, wanting them and acceding to and sort of finding pleasure in the happiness of others. Whereas in the 7-limb puja, the rejoicing is rejoicing in the cause of that happiness, so that you can, and in so doing, you create merit, an enormous amount of merit, for you to be able to create that same virtue in the future. Rejoicing in the virtues of others, if they're an equal footing spiritually to you, you create an equal amount of merit to them. Even, they made 100,000 prostrations in Bodh Gaya, and rather than feeling jealous or denigrating that, that's nothing, they had a benefactor or something like this, you actually rejoice in that virtue. You create the same karma as having done 100,000 prostrations. So Michael, you don't have to go to Bodh Gaya. 100,000. Have you gone to Bodh Gaya to 100,000? Not yet. Okay. So here, this is talking about rejoicing in the happiness of others. according to Mudra Dharmabhadra's commentary here. Let me see, where are we? So not only being free of jealousy, the kind of jealousy that can't bear the happiness of others, but rejoicing, developing a joy which rejoices in their happiness. This is what the verse is saying. Please grant me blessings to feel joy in the happiness of others. This is the striving for great love, which is the desiring that other beings be conjoined with happiness. Okay. So I'll review that again next time, because we're just beginning the Mahayana path here. But let me just introduce the next verse. So this was the way to meditate on equalizing oneself and others. So this is the first of the meditations of this second method to develop bodhicitta. The first method was six causes and effect, the 7 points of cause and effect. 6 of them are causes, 1 of the effect is bodhicitta. Here, this is the first meditation on equalizing oneself and others. So if you are a being of sharper intellect, sharper faculties, this is this you should spend some time on, is the foundation. So then the way to meditate on exchanging self and others, which is the next step, equalizing and exchanging. In order to exchange oneself and others, it has a very particular meaning. It doesn't mean you pretend to be them. You stalk, you get rid of them, and then you go to the bank and say that I'm George, I want his account or something like that. It doesn't exchanging yourself like that. It doesn't mean well, other things you might think that means. What it means is exchanging your attitude of importance. Right now, we consider ourselves to be more important than others. We cherish ourselves. We hold ourselves as dear, more so than others. There may be some exceptions. When you have a baby child, you may cherish their well-being more than your own for a certain time until they get old enough and cranky enough when they're teenagers or beyond, or they start to do something naughty, in which case your happiness is more important again to yourself than their happiness. But generally, we cherish ourselves more than others. So exchanging self and others means exchanging the attitude. Right now, primacy put upon our own happiness, cherishing ourself and our own happiness more so than others. First, equalizing, that our happiness and others' happiness are equal. That was the previous verse. And then eventually being training to be able to exchange and eventually cherish others' welfare more than your own. Like the Jataka tales, the stories of the Buddha's previous lives, when he gave his life for others, accepted criticism and so forth, always, sometimes to the extreme that you think, oh, that's totally illogical. How could he do that? Give away his wife and children and, accept all these sufferings, let people kill him, all with the aim of developing enlightenment, achieving enlightenment through the Bodhisattva path. So let me just introduce this next verse. There are 4 outlines to that. The first is the faults of cherishing oneself, self-cherishing. So you know what self-cherishing means? It's not the same as self-grasping, right? Do you know what the difference between self-cherishing and self-grasping is? Venerable?
Self-grasping refers to the way in which you hold your identity as being inherent, and self-cherishing is on the basis of holding it in that way, then seeing it as more important.
Right. Sort of like an imprint of self-grasping. Even the hearers and solitary realizers, when they're aiming for arhatship, for nirvana, and when they become an arhat, say they're still alive, they have eliminated self-grasping completely, right? The arhat. Would you agree? But they have not eliminated self-cherishing. At that point, given the choice to remain in cyclic existence and work for sentient beings, or entering into the final nirvana, passing away so that they'll never return, they go for that. They got to get out of here. What is that famous song? We've got to get out of this place. So let's see, will you put up the verse again? We'll just introduce that. Sorry, Sonny. Okay, there we go. Rangni chepa simpe chongne di, midu dugnal kepe gyurtongne, lelendela kondu zungchete, dagzen donchen chomba jingilo. This chronic disease of self-cherishing, Rangni chepa simpe, that's holding oneself as dear, that's the self-cherishing. Chongne. Chongne ne means disease or illness or sickness. Chongne means a chronic disease. Means it's something that, you may, most of the time, someone has a chronic disease, they've no real cure for it yet, and you just take something to eliminate the symptoms. You take cough syrup that causes you to stop coughing so much, hoping that it'll go away. Chronic disease is one that keeps on going, right? Is the cause of giving this chronic disease of self-cherishing. So it's something that we've had since beginningless time. It's a chronic disease. We've never gotten rid of it. We might have been able to reduce it at somewhere along the line. Is the cause giving rise to my unsought suffering? Midu dugna, well, you could say unsought suffering. Is there any suffering that's sought? Oh, this is a good question. I have to see. You can leave it up. I'll just scroll down the people who can I ask? Thai, is there any suffering that's sought? It says unsought is the cause of the arisal of unsought suffering. Is there any suffering that's sought?
I'm sorry, are you talking to me?
Yes. Is that your name? Oh, Tal, not Thai.
Is there deliberately sought out suffering?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I'm not talking about a masochist. Yeah, there's you might say that some people see, or whether people, I can't remember what it's called. When you go, some lady whips you and you, something like that. What is that called? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm not talking about that. Is there any kind of suffering that people ordinarily seek?
I mean, maybe conventionally, but I think if it's all rooted in ignorance, then I would say no.
Oh, we all seek changeable suffering, don't we? What do you think? Susie's partially nodding there. Susie Lloyd, we all want to be happy, right? We all want, right now, all we know of is contaminated happiness. So we all want that. We desire that. So unsought suffering kind of emphasizes suffering of suffering, because we all are seeking contaminated happiness, which is suffering of, which is what it calls changeable suffering, right? So that's sought. This is unsought. So I'm sorry, Sunny, toss it up again there if you can, if you got it. So this chronic disease of self-cherishing, cherishing oneself, is the cause giving rise to my unsought suffering. Leyland dela kongdu zungchete. So Leyland means blame. De here means sort of laying the blame on that self-cherishing, because the self-cherishing is the cause for all the things that we don't like, right? Everything going wrong, all the bad karma we've created initially were instigated by actions, of course, due to self-grasping, but because we cherished ourself, we engaged in these negative actions. So we didn't engage in contaminated virtue here. We're talking about suffering of suffering. So placing the blame on that self-cherishing thought. Kongdu zungchete. Kongdu zung means holding a grudge. You know, you've blamed something, and then you, as a result of that blame, you seek retribution. You hold a grudge. So I think Shantideva and Dalai Lama, other lamas have said, if there's anything you should hold a grudge against, it's not sentient beings, it's your own self-cherishing thought. And of course, the self-grasping. Leyland dela kongdu zungchete, dagzen donchen jompa jingilob. Dagzen means self-grasping. So earlier we're talking about self-cherishing. Remember, Venerable Dundrup gave the difference between them. Here it says, and destroy the monstrous demon of selfishness. Dagzen means self-grasping. Doesn't mean selfishness so much. I think anyway, Donshen means great demon here, monstrous demon. So this has some interesting medical connotations. I know I'm just 3 minutes over, but I'm going to just continue for another minute or two as introducing this verse. Generally, Tibetan medicine believes that when you have a chronic disease spreading throughout, the countryside or someplace, that the cause of that is some kind of spirit, a dun. Here it says monstrous demon, some, great demon. So the real fundamental way to get rid of the chronic disease is to get rid of its fundamental cause, these spirits that are somehow causing this. This is just by analogy. So what's the cause of the self-cherishing thought? It's the dagzen, the self-grasping. So that's one way of understanding this very kind of subtle, deep meaning here. So it's talking about two things. If you really want to get rid of the self-cherishing completely, you have to get rid of the self-grasping eventually, the great demon of self-grasping. So this verse has very deep, widespread kind of implication here. This chronic disease of self-cherishing, having, what do we say? Yeah, having seen, does this verse say that here? It just says is, oh no, perceiving this, yeah. So you could put the perceiving, seeing that this chronic disease of self-cherishing is the cause that gives rise to unsought suffering. I seek your blessings to blame, to blame, begrudge, and destroy the monstrous demon of self-grasping. Okay, so we're going to continue next time. Wait a second, is this right?
It's actually 2 weeks, Venerable George. We're not seeing you next week.
Okay, thank you for reminding me. I was just thinking, because in the tenets class last time, or the time before last, I cut them short, an hour and a half. I was trying to remember if we're 2 hours, or hour and a half, we're hour and a half. So we just reached the end. Before we leave and say dedication, is there anyone who wants some clarification or has a question or a correction to something that I've said? Oh, Barbara? Oh, okay. You sometimes your hand goes up, I think.
No, I was thinking that you brought to light something that I have not understood for months and have been striving to understand.
Oh, good. What was that?
The difference between self-grasping and self-cherishing.
Okay. Yeah.
I kept on asking Dundrib, Venerable Dundrib, why these people don't want to come back and help. And that's the difference.
Oh, the hearers, solitary realizers. Yeah. Yeah. They still have that. And so even when they become an arhat, through meditating on emptiness alone, it doesn't eliminate the self-cherishing thought. But if you meditate on great compassion, in bodhicitta, along with meditation on emptiness, at a certain point, you start to, well, you can put effort in eliminating self-cherishing through bodhicitta alone, but you can't destroy it completely according to the Prajna Paramita and the Madhyamaka school. In order to, so that there's no chance of it ever coming back, you have to have realized emptiness directly. But just realizing emptiness directly alone doesn't eliminate the self-cherishing. So the arhats are the prime example, because the example my teacher Lama Yeshe used to give is like if you're at the pool party, cocktail party around the pool, and you've had a couple of martinis and whatever else you're imbibing there, and you have beautiful men and women around you, you're enjoying music, playing, dancing, and someone brings a phone, you're kind of half inebriated already, and someone says, "It's your mother. I'm I'm mom, I'm in this burning building, please save me." And Lama Yeshe said that with self-cherishing, you kind of say, later, you put the phone down, so the one who has eliminated the self-cherishing or has begun to reduce it would feel a responsibility to go back into that burning building of cyclic existence. Here's another analogy. So we talked about the ocean of cyclic existence, the prison of cyclic existence, the burning building of cyclic existence, diving back into that, even with happiness, to eliminate the suffering of sentient beings. Okay, good point. Anyone else? Jennifer.
Yes, thank you so much, Venerable George. I had a question pertaining to the different scopes and practicing like everyday applied Dharma. And for example, if there's an object that I'm attached to, like ice cream, one could look at it in different levels. One could look at it as maybe suffering of change, or one might meditate, may all beings enjoy, which is more, developing the Mahayana scope, or one might try to think about the causes and conditions to bring it out, and, looking at emptiness, one might offer to the guru, et cetera, and I wonder if switching between the scopes is a good way to sort of reinforce the different aspects, the different scopes in everyday life, or should we start more sequentially? And more specifically, sometimes I'm concerned that I don't meditate on renunciation enough as the foundation to make those other sequential meditations effective on the higher scopes.
Yeah, I agree. So I mentioned a couple of times that one of my dear teachers, Geshe Repton, used to say that his sort of the one Dharma regret he had in this life was that there were some days that he didn't do the meditation on the Lamrim, sort of like glance meditation, because it's kind of like the elixir that when the mind is is, you know, agitated by all of the delusions, you know, things are, you're grasping to the appearance of this life or attachment and so forth. Going through those meditations, you remind yourself of the various antidotes. Some of them that might have been effective to reduce your craving or desires or your unhappiness or something in the past may not be applicable right now because they're temporal antidotes. So you have to, you know, in going through the glance meditation, you remind yourself of other antidotes that might be applicable. You know, like for instance, we'll be coming later when we talk about the training of the mind, the 7 points training of the mind. One of the essential advices is that when this vessel-like world, you know, the environment, I say, you know, the vessel-like world, that means the environment and the beings therein are filled with the, you know, the results of negative karma of the past. I mean, the collective karma, you know, that we're all experiencing, earthquakes and epidemics and things like that, and your own personal experiences. And undesired suffering falls like rain. Again, the undesired suffering comes there. Grant me blessings to take this, see this as an opportunity to extinguish my negative karma, you know, by, you know, and to be, you know, when I'm pressed, I know most of these verses by heart, but when you put on the spot, sometimes I forget. They say that forgetting things that you've memorized in the past is a sign of some type, a lack of guru devotion in other lifetimes. I say. Oh yeah, to grant me blessings to take adverse conditions into the path, having seen this falling of undesired suffering of the environment and oneself as the extinguishing of negative karma. So there are different kinds of antidotes that you can apply at different times, and if to be able to apply different ones, you have to be familiar. That's why the glance meditation is very useful. Also, the example I gave of the sword, the knife, two-edged knife. Sometimes you need to use the 7 points of cause and effect to elevate your development of bodhicitta. When that kind of gets stale, you know, you're not making any progress, or some points are a little bit unclear, switch to equalizing self and others. Yeah, one of the verses that I find very useful, I mentioned earlier this talk today, recognizing the faults of samsaric perfections, you know, the perfect samsara, that consuming or enjoying them brings no real satisfaction. You always want more, you know, just enjoying something like ice cream. You'll always want more. It's the doorway to all suffering. When I eat ice cream in the evening, I always have acid reflux, but you know, sometimes I have to remember that. It's the doorway of all suffering. It has other meanings, of course, and it's not reliable. There's sometimes when you know, the bowl of ice cream just doesn't do anything for you. So to think of those things, various antidotes can help. And to know those various antidotes, you have to be kind of like, not encyclopedic, but you have to know, you know, the various antidotes that the Buddha suggested. So the glance meditation is very useful for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have a comment or observation? Susie Lloyd, go for it.
Thank you for the teachings.
Yeah.
I'm just aware that I've been learning recently to be grateful. And now I don't want to be too grateful for ice cream and samsaric stuff. So it's knowing how to balance that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't want to be in aversion all the time. Like, oh, that's bad, that's bad, that's
Yeah,
bad.
so-
That's bad.
So what one does in a case like that is to think, oh, I've got this great fortune. I've got a nice apartment. I'm not sick. I've got enjoyments and things. I'd like to have that again in the future, but all of what I'm doing right now is experiencing the results of my past virtuous karma. I'm kind of like exhausting that. If I want to have this, these kind of resources in the future, I have to create more virtuous karma. So what's the karma to be born with a attractive form that other people find attractive, not repulsive, is a practice of morality. What's the cause of having resources? It's a practice of generosity. So if I want to have these things in the future, I want to be, not repulsive to others. I want to be attractive. I want to have resources and so forth. I have to practice ethics, morality, and generosity. So also when we come in the later verses about training the mind, that's, there's a verses that say, whatever occurs, be it good or bad, use that as a cause to develop the two bodhicittas. The two bodhicittas means conventional bodhicitta, which is the desiring of enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings. And all of the meditations that lead up to that, creating merit. And ultimate bodhicitta is the wisdom that realizes emptiness, realizes that eliminates the great demon of self-grasping. That accumulates the collection of wisdom. So we need both. We need merit to experiencing, attractive surroundings, myself being attractive, resources and so forth, and not hearing bad sounds. We have to avoid criticizing others. So if we want to continue to have that, want to have a good reputation, we speak kindly of others and, so forth. So that might be one way that you can transform, like it says, whatever occurs, whatever appears, be it good or bad, like here you're talking about good things occurring, you're thinking, I've got these things, I've got my ice cream, got my stash. If I want to have that in the future, I have to create the causes of that. So it brings the mind back to the Dharma rather than dwelling on and just enjoying it alone.
Okay.
Anyway, that's one suggestion. Okay. So thank you very much for your attention. Let's do a quick dedication. In time, we'll be talking about the two kinds of dedication: the conventional dedication, which is what we're doing now, where you make a strong aspiration that these merits ripen in such a way that it enhances your spiritual development up to and including enlightenment, and ultimate dedication, which means meditating on the emptiness of the three spheres, which means in this case, one could think the myself, the creator of this merit, is empty of inherent existence. The merits created that I can imagine, they're not something you can sense with your eyes, but you have a feeling, you understand you've created some merit. They are empty of inherent existence. And the goals dedicated to development, spiritual development, up to and including enlightenment, that also, although we're aspired to, they don't exist inherently. They're empty of inherent existence. But here we're still doing conventional dedication. So think this evening and in the past, I've created virtuous karma, and even the merits that I will create in the future, I'm going to dedicate to that goal of my achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, not just, as we said, because that would be nice for me, but because that is a position from which I can effortlessly and spontaneously, without any error, perfectly guide sentient beings out of cyclic existence into enlightenment. Due to these merits, may I quickly become a Buddha, enlightened being, for the sake of all sentient beings. Thank you very much. So thanks for your attention. It gives me a lot of energy that you didn't fall asleep, at least the ones whose pictures are up there. Maybe the other, I don't know the others. So take care, see you next week, and have a good week. Take care.
Much, Venerable George.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Oh, you said
Thank
next
you
week.
so
I meant
much.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Sorry, yeah. So
Next week is Earth Day.
Next week is
Earth
what?
Day. Earth Day.
Birthday.
Earth.
I didn't catch.
Earth Day.
Oh, Earth Day. It's not Sog Day. Okay, I was going to say, when you do Sog, you do this glance meditation as part of the Guru Puja, but it's Earth Day. So, yes, let's pray for that. We should take prayers for that. Take care. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Bye.
Thank you so much.